So hello viewers, I hope you're all doing great. Um, Today we are going to see a different video. We've been looking into how to work with Hyperledger Fabric, how to create a chain code, how to run a chain code, how to create different methods in chain code, how to call those chain codes from an SDK. But what is important is that when you create a chain code, you have to make it usable. Okay, to make an encode usable, it needs to be easy for an end user to access. Okay, and an end user will not be having an idea of how to work with an complex uh, methods that use by a developer. Okay, so end user needs a nice front end through which he can interact using an UI. So in order to expose your chain code methods to an UI, the best approach is to create web services, which will in turn call the methods of the chain code. So, so this video is for someone who has um, good programming language, not necessarily very good in any programming language, but this basic uh, knowledge in any programming language. And this video is primarily to introduce you to create web services using Node.js. Okay, the reason why I've chosen Node.js because Node.js is possibly the easiest way to create a web services when you compare with any other programming language. And Node.js has a nice compatibility to integrate with the Hyperledger Fabric. Okay, so this particular course is basically a crash course on Node.js, you can say. I'm not going to go into details about all those nitty-gritties of Node.js. I'm just going to give you a small crash course on how to create a web services using Node.js. Okay. Before we jump into these codes, let me introduce you what do you mean by a web service. Let's take this an example. All right. So right. So imagine you have a programming language, okay, or you have written a program using Java. Okay. So this Java may have you created two methods in that Java program. Okay, one could be sum of two numbers, right? A and B, and you've created another method called let's say multiplication of two. Okay, let's say mul of A and B, and this is Java application. So you have a simple program that just creates just two methods. So one to sum two numbers, another one is to multiply two numbers. Okay, and you have another programming language that wanted to use this as a library. Okay, say for example, you have another programming language that is maybe written in let's say C sharp, or let's say Python, or any other programming language that you are familiar with. Okay, okay. All right. So I have created a method called call sum. Okay, so I want whenever somebody executes this method, I want this method to in turn call this particular method. Okay, sum of AB. But the problem here exists is that this call sum cannot call the sum because these two are different platforms. Okay, Java uses JRE to run, whereas Python or C Sharp has its own compiler to actually create the binaries, and it runs in a different way. Okay. So there's no way directly you can call the method that is written in a different platform. Okay. So if you create another method, say let's say this call sum is in the Java. Okay. Then you can this call sum can actually call the sum. Okay. That's absolutely possible. right? But calling this method from another platform is quite not possible because these two are not compatible. Okay, because Java is possibly an oops language. It has some notations. Okay, you have to create a class and you have to create an object of the class and you have to call that object from the class. So uh, you can create another class to call this particular class if it is then publicly accessible. It is doable within that same environment, but if you want to interact with some other application, maybe this application is sitting in a different place. Okay, this is running somewhere in India and this is running somewhere in Australia. So you need to call this method through the web. Okay, that is another problem. So in order to solve this problem, engineering world created something called web services. Okay, web services is something in middle layer. What this web services basically does, a web services create an intermediate layer between the calling platform versus the caller platform. So what happens is this call sum, instead of calling directly the sum, it will call something called in web services. Okay, so this is a web service. So what this web service does, it converts the data point of the sum AB. For example, the sum AB requires two parameters, which is A and B. If you pass these two numbers, it is going to return you another number, which is sum. Say for example, if you are passing 1 and 2, it should return back 3. So basically, it has three data points, which is input A, input B, and output C. So in order to send and receive this data, this web service provides an intermediate layer through which any other unknown programming language can call. So we need a common data representation so that any other program, okay, C# or Python or any other platform can call this web service and send some data and receive some data. So in order to make it generic for all other platforms, web services uses a different a set of data notation. A very popular one is XML. Okay. In olden days, XML was heavily used in web services. They call it scope. And later, slowly, JSON took over because of its simplicity and ease of use. As of today, JSON is primarily used in all web services, and it uses a framework called REST. Okay, REST is simply called as representational state transfer. Okay, don't worry what it is. You can Google it and figure it out. Basically, it transfers your data in the form of JSON and gives it to sum. So now this call sum can call this web service, okay, by sending a JSON input, and it can receive back a JSON input, and it can parse it so that it can be called in C# or Python and any other language that you assume of. So this is basically the idea of what a web service is all about. Right. So now let's see how a web service works, how to create a web service in using Node.js. Okay. Okay. Let's go back to our Visual Studio Code. What I've done, I've created some file. I'm going to delete this. So I'm inside a folder called Node Crash because it's a crash course. I've created Node Crash. Don't think it's going to crash. So and within this folder, there is nothing inside. I will just open folder. You create a simple empty folder called Node Crash. Right. So within that folder, I have nothing. I have one text file. I'll take that also. Okay. So right now I don't have anything in this folder. Okay. To create an application in Node.js, first you have to have Node.js and npm installed. Make sure you have already installed it. Okay. Let me check my Node and npm version. So to do that, I'm going to check Node version. Okay. So it's going to give me version 10.19.0 and npm version, and it's going to give me 6.14. So I have Node and npm already installed. If you have not installed, please go ahead and install for Node.js and npm from its website. And you can also use the npm to work with the different versions of Node. So let's not get into those details now. So let me, I'm assuming that you already have installed Node.js and npm in your. Now I'm going to demonstrate a simple application that is going to be a cool application. You will end of this course, you will definitely, if you have not worked with Node.js before, you're definitely going to fall in love with Node.js because of its simplicity. Okay. So, so how to work with Node.js? Okay. First thing, Node.js uses the JS as an extension. Okay. So any file you create, app.js, index.js, hello world.js, whatever file you're going to create, you're going to create with the JS extension. To start an application, what you can simply do is you can do something called npm init. Right. So when you run this npm init, it is going to ask you some questions. Say, for example, what is the package name you want to give? I'm just going to give enter. I'm not going to give anything. If you just give enter, it is going to create the default, whatever it is mentioning in the bracket. So I'm okay with the name Node Crash. I'm okay with the version. This is a tutorial application. Okay, I'm giving some description. It says entry point in index.js. It doesn't matter. You can name anything else also. If you are going to have test, you will have enter the command and get keywords. I'm going to just skip all those things. I'm going to say yeah, okay. So finally, it creates a JSON and it asks if this is okay. I'm going to say yes. All right. So now, when you see this image, which means that it successfully completed creating an application. So let's see what it has created. Created something called a package.json. Okay. Open this package.json. It has all the information that we entered when we do npm init. Okay. So package.json is a configuration file which maintains all your dependencies for the application that you're going to create. So when you're working with Node.js, you may be using a lot of libraries because npm has a huge plethora of libraries that is very helpful in creating this application. You don't have to reinvent a lot of wheels. Okay. So so this package.json is important to identify that this is the Node.js application. If you see package.json anywhere, then you will know that this is actually a Node.js application. Okay. As simple as that. So when you have package.json, which means your application is ready, you can start coding. Okay. So I'm going to create my first file. Okay. I'm going to name it app.js. Right. Okay. So this is my first file. I've created my first file. How do I start with? Okay. Public static void main. That is Java. JavaScript is much simpler than that. Okay. It takes care of all your access modifiers and everything. You can directly write any line of code and you can just see the output. A simple line. Let me print something. Console.log. Hello world. Save it. And to run this application, I'm going to type node app.js. Okay. You see that it has printed hello world. Okay. Mistake. Save it. Run it again. You see it has printed hello world. Okay. That is how your first Node.js application is ready. Okay. It's just that simple. You don't have any other import library, nothing. Okay. Console.log, you got that. Next, let me create a variable. Okay. To create a variable, it follows the same structure as the JavaScript. You don't have to declare it as an int or a string or anything. You just say where let's say a is equal to 1 and where b is equal to 2, and that print a print init. So console.log log a comma b. Right, see what happens. 1 and 2, it printed both. Okay. Let me say this a plus b. Save it. I printed a plus 3. Let's say instead of 2, I'm going to add some string here. Let's see what happens. Okay. It automatically combines a number with a word. Okay. So now, since there is a string involved in it, it is going to consider 1 also as a string, and it concatenated a and b. Okay. So that's how it works. Let's say instead of word, I put 3 here. See what happens. still it concatenated instead of adding, because 3 is within the double quote. So whenever you type a double quote, it will understand it is a string variable, and if you have a number, it will understand a number. You can put a semicolon at the end. It is not really going to throw an error because you missed something there. Okay? It's much more friendly. So, so that is how you declare a variable. Okay, or you can use the let also keyword to create a variable. Both should ideally work. Works. Either you can use a where or a let. If you want to declare a constant, you declare using a keyword called const. Okay, so that is how you create a variable. And let's see how to create a method or a function in using Node.js. Okay, so now I'm going to create a method called sum. Create method called function sum. Okay, and the sum takes two arguments, a and b. Okay, and it returns a plus b. Okay, a plus b. Okay, so now what I'm going to do, I'm just going to call this sum. All right, and I'm going to pass our a and b. I'm going to store that in a variable called c, and let me print that c. Console.log. All right, let's see what we get. We got the same 3. So this is how you call a method. I declared a method here. I called a method here. The syntax to declare a method is function name, and a list of parameters, and the logic, whatever you want to put it. So it's that simple. Now what we will do is I'll tell you how to create a call a method from a different file. Okay, so I'm going to create another file called calc.js. Right. So I have a calculator.js. I'm going to create two methods here. Okay, function sum and function multiplication. Within that sum, I'm going to say return a plus b, and to return a plus b, you should actually accept a and b parameter, and same here, then a b, and return a star b. All right, so I created two functions called sum and multiplication. Now let me try to call that function here. So delete all these lines of code. Let me try to call where c is equal to sum, and I will pass parameters 1, 2. Let me run what happens. Let me see if I run this console.log of c. Okay. So now this throws an error. Okay. Why? Because it says sum is not defined, because sum is not defined anywhere in app.js. Okay. It's actually defined in calculator. How am I going to access a method which is in a different file? This is the way of abstracts, like how it does in classes in Node.js environment. You create this different file, and then you have to somehow create a link between that other file to this file in order to access the methods. So how do we do that? To do that, first step, what you need to do is you need to call a method keyword called module. Okay, module.export. Export two methods, sum. Okay, so I've created called module.export sum, and I think we can export this, or the right way to do is something like this: sum I'm exporting like in a JSON. You can use a different name to represent it outside. I'm gonna keep the same name, so I think that should work. Okay. So I've exported this, which means that I've given made this public. Okay, like in Java terms, it is accessible. Both these methods are now accessible from outside class, right? So now this app.js, I want to use the summon method. However, though I have exported the here in the calc, app.js will still not be able to access that summon what do you call the null. Okay, let me try to run it again. Still it is the same error. Say sum is not defined. So in order to use the sum, you need to import that calc here. The syntax to import the calc methods here is something called require. Okay, so I'm going to create a variable called calc. Let's see. Not mandatory. You can put small c also. Okay, where calc is equal to require. Okay, require. And since it's a file, I'm going to give the path for the file dot slash calc. Now I have the variable calc, and within that calc, I should be able to have, I should call the method. Let me see now. Right, we saved the file, run this. That again says that calculate sum is not a function. For some reason, it is not able to access the sum. Let's go back and see what is the went wrong. So we have the sum, we have the mul, and we have module.export and exported it. If there is a mistake here in the syntax, the module.exports. Okay. Now I think we should be able to access the sum and mul here. Let me run this up. Calculate sum 1, 2. See? Now you see, you can understand how to call a function from other files. So you can create a nice folder structure with different layers in it. Okay. Have integrating with the database, you can create a DAO layer, okay, a folder where only the DAO files are there. You have a service layer, you have core logic, and you can create a web services layer, multiple functions. If you are building a large project, this will be good. It's very important that you understand how this works. So now that we know how to call a method, now let's build web services. Okay. Not going to discuss any control structures like if else or for loop or while loop. Okay, the syntax are pretty much common like in Java or C. So I'm not going to discuss about those things. I'm going to discuss how to create a web service. The important part of the video. In order to create a web services, you have an amazing module called Express.js. You will import that Express.js, and Express.js gives you a nice way of creating web services. Okay. So web services, when I say web services, there are multiple methods that web services operates on. We call that as HTTP methods. Okay, let me Google what is HTTP methods. REST API tutorial, something tutorial. W3. Okay. So you see that what is HTTP is a protocol. The whole internet works on this protocol, and this protocol works with these list of methods. Okay, get, post, put, head, delete, patch, and options. And you can read through what you mean by get method, what do you mean by post method, what do you mean by put, head, delete. Basically, it covers all the CRUD operation and additionally 2 more methods. Okay, sorry, 3 more methods. So primarily we're going to use these 2 methods. Okay, get and post. Okay, get is to read something, whereas post is to write something. Okay. So if your web services requires an input, you will use post, and if your web service does not require any input, it's just going to give you an information, and then you use get. So get is a read only, whereas post is a read and write both. Okay. So what is a put? Put is basically like creating it for the first time. Insert. Okay. Okay. And what is delete, what is head, patch. You can read about in W3 schools. I think they have a nice documentation here. That's the HTTP method. Okay. So web service also, you have to create a get method or a post method. You have to mention what is the HTTP method you are going to use. Right. Now we're going to import a library called Express.js, a node module basically. Okay. So how do you install a node module? Very simple. Command is npm install name of the node module. Now we are going to install Express. We will install Express. Right. Now it's installing Express. Right. So now you see that the node modules, there's a folder created called node modules, and it has copied all the necessary methods from Express.js. Okay. So now you have, also you can check it in the package.json that it has the dependencies part. You have Express with its version installed in it. This is how you will install. There are multiple variants in npm install. You can install it globally, like you can use it in any of your node application, or you can install only locally and all. But just npm install just works for me. Now that we have the npm install, let's create our first web service, deleting everything in app.js. And as a first step, I'm going to create a variable called express, and I'm going to call require. This is going to import the library for my app.js to use, and I'm going to create another variable called app express. So what this express is going to give another variable called app. Using this app, you will be able to call app as the get method, post method, whatever method you wanted, you can create it. Okay. What is the next step we're going to do? We are going to call our we're going to create an get method. Let's create a simple get method and see how it works. Okay. I'm going to create a method called app.get. Okay, so the get method requires two arguments. One is the path of your web services. So as soon as I call my website, let's say my website is www.google.com. As soon as somebody calls the google.com, I want to return some data. So that is slash. And the second argument is a callback function. This callback function has two parameters, which is response and request and response. Okay. So this is one way of creating a method, or you can write you can give a function like that. Also, you can give a name and stuff. But easiest way is arrow notation. So now that I have app.get, and what does it does? It does rest.send. It's going to send a simple string message. Hello. You have successfully called a web service. So now I've created a web service, and for this web service to be able to call by another application, the application has to know where this web service actually is. Okay. So which means that it has to be hosted somewhere, okay, on a particular IP, particular port. Okay. So you have to specify which port this application is going to work. So I'm going to create another variable or constant called port, and I'm going to run this in a port number called 3000. Okay. I'm going to say tell this app to listen, okay, on this particular port number. I'll do this in the end, app.listen. Okay, and within that listen, you're going to tell which port number you have to listen for, and second, it has two arguments again, and the second argument is again in function, callback function. And this callback function, basically you're going to print something like whenever this particular that is called, you're going to print something. Okay, that's what I'm going to say. I'm going to say console.log. I'm going to say this application is running on the port numbered port. Okay, so if you want to change the port, you can directly change here anytime. So if instead of 3000 you want to run in 5000, you can just change it here, and this application should ideally work. So now let's run this application. So let's go back to our terminal and type node app.js. It says the application is running on port number 3000, and now which means the IP is local, so it is localhost colon 3000 is the address through which this web service is being served. Okay, to check that, you can use many clients. Okay, you can use Postman. What I'm going to use is something called advanced REST client. Okay, so advanced REST client is basically an again in your Chrome. In your Chrome, go to this apps. Okay, you will see this ARC. This is advanced REST client. If you don't have it, go to the setting and how to I'll just say advanced REST client. REST client Chrome. Okay, so just click that. It will take you to the Chrome Web Store, and I have launched it because I will install. For you, it will be say install. Click that, your icon will appear here. You can go here and click it. But I have a shortcut here, so I'll use this shortcut. I'm going to open this. When I use advanced REST client, this is how it looks like. I've already created this. So that don't worry. Okay, it you have to mention what method you are going to use. Okay, in our code you can see we have created a get method because it's not receiving any input, right? It's only giving an output. So I'm going to say get method. The URL is basically http localhost. I think it is not in HTTPS, so I'm going to keep localhost colon 3000. It's our port, and the path is just slash. I'm going to call this method, and you see that you received the response. You have successfully called website. Amazing. So which means that now this URL, okay, localhost is accessible by other applications. I can build an Angular application. I can call this web services, and I can get the data from NodejS. Okay, it's that simple to create a web service using NodejS. Now what we will do is we will see how to use the web services to call another method. So we'll try. I'll also show you how to create a post method. Once you understand that, we'll come to the end of this video. Now you understood how to create a get method. What we will do is right now we have this calc method, right? We will create another web services to access these two methods from outside world, okay, through the web services. So I'm going to say app.post, and I'm going to give path as sum. Okay, so if anybody calls localhost colon 3000 slash sum, he should be able to call the sum method. Not required. Maybe you can pass some parameter also in the path. And request response arrow function. Okay. So what I'm going to do is now I'm going to I'm expecting a an input to come here in the form of JSON, right? So that comes inside this variable called request. Okay, the request will have the input variable which I'm sending through it. So the request will have the actual input, okay, in the name of body. Okay, so the body will be the actual input which is being sent. Okay, so the body dot let's say the first variable will be first, and let me so we have a request dot body, and it's JSON. It's an object, so this is how you access an object. Either you can say in a square bracket you put it as a string, or you can say body dot first also. That should also ideally work. I'm going to put that in a variable called var first or st first, and I'm going to create another variable called var second, and is equal to request dot body second. Okay, now we have both variables first and second. The next thing is we're going to let's test this first, okay, whether I'm receiving it or not. Okay, so I'm going to say console log first second. Okay, I'm going to print. So when I give an input, it will not return something, but it will at least print something in the console so that I will see if this actually works. Okay, let's run this. Okay, see node app JS. Okay, the application is running. Now I'm going to call some. Let's go back to our advanced REST client. So here I'm going to add the path. Change this method as post because it requires an input. Make sure you use this headers. If you don't use this headers, your request will not reach the server. What basically I do is I simply don't have anything here. I say insert header set. It will insert the default headers that is required for a web server. It says what it should accept, what is the content type, what is the language, etc. In the body, I'm going to declare a JSON called first and second. I've already tested it out, so I have the default. Otherwise, I'll create one second for you. I'm creating a JSON. JSON follows the structure of our bracket, create an attribute and its value. First attribute is first colon value. Value is 1, comma. Second attribute of the attribute is second. The value is same. Right. So we have created the JSON. Let me send this. Okay. I've sent this. It has not returned anything because actually we are not returning it, but it returned an error. Okay. Here it says cannot read property first is of undefined. Okay. So let's try to understand what it means. It means cannot read property first of undefined. So it says the body is actually undefined. Okay. The property of this body, the body itself is undefined. That's why it says it couldn't access first. Okay. So that is a problem. How do we solve this problem? So basically, in order to access the body, you have to tell Express.js that it is going to return a JSON. Earlier, we used to do add another library called a body parser, but nowadays that is not required. In the latest Express, it uses another function called express.js. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say app for all this web service declaration. Say app.use express JSON. Say JSON method. Right. I've declared, I've told app that look app, people are going to send you JSON. Make sure you recognize it. Okay, otherwise it will not happen. Okay. So now let's stop this and run again and see if this works. Right. Now it says application is running on port 3000. Let me go back to my terminal. Sorry, REST client, and I run it again. This time it did not throw any error. Okay, but I've got two console value. One is undefined, another one is 5. Okay, the second is displayed, the first number did not display. Why? Because maybe there is something wrong. FYRST, file name, everything is right? You see input which I'm sending is correctly FRIST. There's a mistake here. I'm changing it FIRST, only then it will return port and then send again. Right, now we got the console 1 and 5. Awesome. Now, since it is not returning in anything, that is why it is still waiting, okay, until the default timeout happens. It will be trying to, it will be waiting for a response to come back. About this here. Now we will call our method in declared here in the character.js. Okay, for that, remember, need the require the file path. So remember, everything goes in quotes. Okay, dot slash means it is in the current folder, and calc.js. So now we have the calc.js accessible in the calc variable. I'm going to say dot first, second. Now we have the first and second. Next, I'm going to send this as a JSON, okay, to the output, so that the output, the end application will also be able to parse it as a JSON. To do that, I'm going to say response.json, okay, and I'm going to pass a JSON. JSON structure goes something like this: answer, attribute, colon, value. Value is basically whatever this one written. So I'm going to cut this and this. So it is just going to return that value here, and our application will receive this. Okay, save this, run it again. It says the application is running on port number 3000, and let's see what happens. Let's go back to our advanced REST client and let's run some. And you see that it has returned 200. Okay, 200 is the default HTTPS response code for a successful message. We got answer is 6. So 1, 5 plus 5 is 6. Let's try with some different numbers. Let's 65, 10, 66, 5, 55, 70. Awesome. So that's it, fellows. This is how create a web service is as simple as this. In the upcoming video, what we will do is we'll instead of using this calc.js, we will call our SDK method like a query, querying the chain code and reading and writing from the chain code. Okay. So thank you very much. See you in the next video. And do not forget to share, subscribe, and comment the video. Thank you.